The Kianjokoma brothers' story is a heavy one. A story about bullies in badges who decided to take the lives of two young brothers, 22-year-old Benson Ndwiga and 19-year-old Emmanuel Mutura Ndwiga for no reason at all. In this episode, we unpack what happened on the day their young lives were cut short by 6 police officers and the aftermath of their tragic demise. Before we get into it, we'd love to state that the police officers mentioned in this video are considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. All information shared in this video is based on publicly available sources and should not be construed as evidence of guilt. Welcome to Silent Shadows. As always, if you appreciate our true crime storytelling, support our work by liking and subscribing. Together, we uncover compelling tales of crimes and mysteries in Kenya and beyond, presenting well-balanced narratives that respect the victims and their loved ones. On 7 September 1999, engineer John Ndwiga and his wife Catherine Wawera welcomed twins into the world. One was a bouncing baby boy whom they named Benson Ndwiga, and the other, a beautiful baby girl called Gladys. The arrival of the twins brought immense joy to the Ndwiga family, who now had 3 kids, Terence, their firstborn, and the twins, Benson and Gladys. The Ndwiga family would continue growing when 2 years later, on New Year's Eve, that is Monday, 31st December 2001, John and Catherine welcomed their youngest child, another baby boy named Emmanuel Mutura Ndwiga. Benson, who was fondly nicknamed Ben, and Emmanuel developed a very close bond, as they were only 2 years apart in age. For Ben, his educational journey began in 2002 at St. Joseph Catholic Church Primary School. He later transferred to another school where he completed his KCPE in 2013. He then joined Fisher's Njiru Secondary School, where he sat for his KCSE in 2017. After high school, he joined Don Bosco Technical Institute in Karen to pursue a course in electrical engineering. At Don Bosco Technical Institute, Ben was doing so well that he was even made a maintenance prefect by the school's administration. As for Emmanuel, he started school in 2005 at St. Joseph Catholic Church Primary School. He eventually moved to St. John's Kaikama Primary School, where he completed his KCPE in 2015. He then joined Kangaru High School and sat for his KCSE in 2019. One thing to know about Emmanuel is he loved debating, and it came as no surprise to his family when he expressed a desire to study law. To pursue his dream of being a lawyer, he joined Kabarak University after completing high school. Outside of his academics, Emmanuel enjoyed cooking and had a deep passion for Formula 1 racing. Ben, on the other hand, was a social butterfly of the family who loved connecting with people, playing rugby and basketball. As 2021 came along, the two young men closed school for their long holidays. In most Kenyan public universities, this is a 3 to 4 months break, typically from April or May to August, which follows the completion of the academic year and gives the students time to gain real-life experience through internships, attachments, and so much more. Ben and Emmanuel's long holiday in 2021 happened in the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, which saw the Kenyan government enforce curfews as part of the measures to curb the spread of the virus. Initially, the curfew ran from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. in most parts of the country. When Ben and Emmanuel closed school, they went back home to Kianjokoma, Embu County. But here's the thing about the two. Despite coming from a wealthy family, they were very industrious and entrepreneurial, and to keep themselves occupied during the school break, they engaged in several activities, like supporting in their parents' farm by picking tea and coffee and overseeing the farm workers. As July 2021 came to an end and farm work dwindled, the two young men approached their dad and asked if he could open them a butchery to help them generate some income to go towards their pocket money. Being the very supportive father he was, he said yes. Ben and Emmanuel then embarked on plans to open the butchery, which exclusively sold pork. The butchery was located in a small building at Njiru Market, approximately 4 kilometers from their home. On Sunday, 1st August 2021, Ben and Emmanuel opened the doors to their pork butchery at Njiru Market. When they opened the butchery, customers flocked to buy meat, and this was partly because of the down-to-earth and likable personalities of Ben and Emmanuel. As evening came, the brothers had made substantial sales, totaling to 15,000 Kenyan shillings. At around 4 p.m., Ben spoke to his dad via phone, letting him know they needed some loose change at the butchery, and his dad organized for the change to be delivered to them. Still around this time, the two brothers also spoke to their mom, Catherine, who had just gotten home from a Chama meeting. She called them to inquire how the business was going, and they told her about how business was booming, the sales they had made, and assured her they'd be taking the money generated from the sales that day home later that evening. Around 7 p.m., as nightfall set in, Ben called his childhood friend, John Mugendi, who was playing video games at a PlayStation shop in Kianjokoma market with their mutual friend Chris Dan. Ben asked if they could meet, mentioning he had something to tell him. Shortly thereafter, Ben and Emmanuel closed the butchery and headed home to drop off a bucket they had used to carry meat that morning. Their mother, who was inside the house, actually had them tossing the bucket over the gate, but she did not see them. After that, the brothers left for Kianjokoma market, where they met up with Mugendi and Chris Dan outside the PlayStation shop. Mugendi suggested they go grab drinks, but Ben and Emmanuel said they wouldn't be drinking that night because they had to wake up early the next day for work and did not want to risk a hangover. The four, that is Ben, Emmanuel, Mugendi and Chris Dan, then headed to Muamuri Club, which was nearby. When they got there, Mugendi and Chris Dan ordered a jug of Senator Keg, which they shared. For Ben and Emmanuel, true to their word, they did not have any alcohol. Instead, they just chilled with Mugendi and Chris Dan, chatting, listening to music, and playing pool. Around 8 p.m., Catherine called, and her sons told her they'd be home in about 20 minutes. At 8:20 p.m., Catherine called them again, and Emmanuel reassured her they'd be home soon. But by 9 p.m., when they still hadn't arrived, Catherine, who was quite worried, called them again at 9:17 p.m., and they promised they'd be home in just a few minutes. After this call from their mom, Ben told Mugendi and Chris Dan that it was getting late and they should head home since the 10 p.m. COVID-19 curfew was fast approaching. Sadly, Ben and Emmanuel would not make it home alive. At 9:50 p.m., just 10 minutes before curfew, the police from Manyata police station, which was about 5 kilometers from Kianjokoma market, arrived at the market to make sure no one was out and about after 10 p.m. The four young men, Mugendi, Chris Dan, Ben, and Emmanuel, left the club at 10:01 p.m. using a back street. They had barely walked 20 meters when they saw a police car and two plainclothes police officers standing next to it. One of the police officers was holding a large stick, as described by Mugendi. Sensing they might be arrested for violating the curfew, Ben suggested they run. They all took off, but the rain had made the ground slippery and it was dark. Unfortunately, Emmanuel tripped and fell on the side of the road. Ben shouted to his baby brother, "Achana na viatu hepa," meaning keep running and leave your shoes behind. Mugendi, Chris Dan and Ben continued running for a few more seconds before Ben went back to help Emmanuel, who was still on the ground. As for Chris Dan, he managed to escape, while Mugendi found a nearby ditch where he hid. From there, he could see and hear everything happening on the road. Mugendi says he saw the police car, a Land Cruiser which had been chasing them, stopping where Emmanuel and Benson were. He then heard Emmanuel, who was still on the ground, being badly beaten, along with his brother Benson. The police then placed Ben and Emmanuel, who was unconscious, in the front seat of the car. After the police Land Cruiser sped off, Mugendi luckily made his way home, which was just about 3 minutes away from Ben and Emmanuel's home. When he got home, Mugendi tried calling the two brothers, but their phones were off. Their parents were also trying to reach them. As their father, Engineer John Ndwiga, later recounted, he arrived home around 10 p.m. and learned from his wife Catherine that Ben and Emmanuel were not yet home. John and Catherine tried calling them, but their phones were off. They left the gate open just in case they came home in the dead of the night. Despite their worry, John and Catherine eventually went to bed. However, they were still uneasy about their son's absence since they had never stayed out all night before. Around 3 a.m., now Monday 2nd August 2021, John woke up and checked their rooms, only to find empty beds. When morning came, Catherine woke up early and headed to Kianjokoma market, hoping Ben and Emmanuel had slept at Mutura club because of the curfew. She found the club closed, but she found out from the traders that the police had arrested a few individuals the previous night for violating the COVID-19 curfew. Catherine and John then decided to go to Manyata police station, where, as you shall see, their experience with the police had all the markers of a cover-up. They arrived at the station around 8 a.m., accompanied by their family friend Andrew. At the station, a policeman checked the occurrence book, OB, and told them that their sons had not been booked at the station the night before. Catherine, John, and Andrew decided to visit other police stations in Embu to check if Ben and Emmanuel had been booked there. Their second stop was Runyenje's police station, more than 15 kilometers away. They arrived there around 10:30 a.m., only to be told that Ben and Emmanuel were not there. Undeterred, they drove 25 kilometers to Embu police station, reaching there about 1 p.m. At the reception, they spoke to a policeman who informed them that their sons were not being held there and advised them to check Itabwa police station, roughly 5 kilometers away. When they arrived at Itabwa, the result was the same. Ben and Emmanuel were not there. Determined to find their sons, they then made several phone calls to other police stations in Embu, but every attempt led to the same disappointing outcome. After a long and exhausting day, Catherine and John finally got home around 9 p.m., holding on to the faint hope that their sons might have returned. To their dismay, the house was empty. Still desperate for answers, they decided to go back to Kianjokoma market, hoping to gather any new information about their sons' whereabouts. Sadly, their search yielded no results, and they returned home a few minutes before the 10 p.m. curfew, still without answers. The following morning, on Tuesday 3rd August 2021, Catherine and John returned to Runyenje's police station to file a missing persons report. While there, John asked if they could speak to the OCS to request assistance in tracing their sons' phones. When they met with the OCS, he directed them to the DCIO's office, which was also within the same station. At the DCIO's office, they encountered a woman who, upon hearing John explain that his two sons were missing, she asked if they had not heard about the bad case at Manyata police station. Realizing that John and Catherine were unaware of what she was referring to, she directed them to her superior. John and Catherine then proceeded to meet with the DCIO himself. After providing all the key details about their missing sons, the DCIO asked them to leave his office and give him some time. A few minutes later, he called them back into his office and instructed them to go to Manyata police station and speak to the OCS, one Abdullahi Yaya. John and Catherine immediately drove to Manyata police station. As per John's account of events, OCS Abdullahi told them that two suspects had been arrested in Kianjokoma on Sunday 1st August 2021, but had allegedly jumped from a police car while they were being transported to the police station. As OCS Abdullahi was explaining this, the DCIO of Manyata police station joined them. It was only after the DCIO joined them that OCS Abdullahi revealed the two suspects, two young men, were deceased. At this point, John recalls that the DCIO nonchalantly chipped in that the deaths of the two young men were unfortunate. The DCIO then insensitively proceeded to show John and Catherine photos of their deceased sons on his phone. The images were horrifying, showing their sons lying lifeless on the road with severe injuries. How the DCIO got these photos, who took them, and where they were taken are questions that remain unanswered. After delivering the devastating news to John and Catherine, OCS Abdullahi informed them that the case was classified as a traffic offense. He then gave them a phone number of a traffic police officer named Carol, who was stationed at Embu police station, and instructed them to contact Carol, who would take them to Embu Level 5 hospital to identify the bodies of their sons. When John and Catherine arrived at Embu police station, John noticed that the officers seemed to be avoiding them. It wasn't until Catherine started screaming and demanding to be taken to see her sons that Carol finally responded. Allegedly, she told them that she had been waiting to see if any relatives of the two young men would come forward. If no one had shown up, she claimed that they would have gone to Kianjokoma to look for their relatives. Catherine and John finally saw their sons, Ben and Emmanuel, at the mortuary, where they were joined by family and friends. At the mortuary, they found the brothers bundled together on the same trolley, their remains yet to be preserved. They also had a chance to speak to one of the mortuary attendants, who told them that the police had brought the bodies in around 4 a.m., but the attendants had initially refused to receive them. The officers had allegedly claimed the young men were thugs, but the attendants did not believe it. How the police ultimately managed to get the bodies into the mortuary remained unclear, though it was suspected they had gone through a more compliant mortuary attendant. Something else that deeply disturbed the family was the state of the brothers' bodies. According to John, Ben seemed to have suffered the most. His head was completely deformed, his body covered in bruises, and one of his legs was broken. John also noticed boot prints on Ben's hoodie around the torso, suggesting he had been stomped on several times. Remember, Ben is the older brother who had gone back to help Emmanuel after he fell while they were running from the police. As for Emmanuel, John observed that his primary injuries were on his head. His skull was severely wounded and even cracked. As for the 15,000 Kenyan shillings Ben and Emmanuel had on them from selling pork, on Sunday, 1st August 2021, it was missing. Determined to get answers, John returned to Manyata police station with a few of his friends. They met with the OCPD one Emily Ngaruya, and when the OCPD called Corporal Benson Boothia, who was the head of the COVID-19 curfew enforcement operation, on the night Ben and Emmanuel were murdered, he could not answer John's questions, including why his sons were not booked into the police station with the rest of the individuals who had flaunted the COVID-19 curfew, and why their bodies had been registered at the mortuary as unidentified. The brutal deaths of the two brothers at the hands of the police devastated their parents and siblings who shared a very close bond with them. The tragedy also sparked outrage in Kianjokoma, where residents protested calling for justice for the two brothers. The protest lasted for 3 whole days, from Wednesday 4th August to Friday 6th August 2021. Tragically, despite the protests being aimed at seeking justice for Ben and Emmanuel, who had lost their lives at the hands of the police, 2 more residents of Kianjokoma were also killed by the police during this time. On Thursday, 5th August 2021, one of the protesters by the name Moses Kimathi was fatally shot, while the other, James Mushangi, was arrested along with several others. They were tortured by the police, and after being released, James fell ill and passed away on Thursday, 9th September 2021 as a result of the injuries he had sustained while in police custody. His autopsy report revealed that he died from blunt force trauma, which caused internal bleeding in his head and abdomen. It was also during the protests that the residents of Kianjokoma burnt the Manyata police car that had been used to ferry Ben and Emmanuel on the night they died at the hands of the police. In so doing, sadly, crucial forensic evidence that would have been recovered from the car was destroyed. In a tone-deaf response to the protests and the casualties, the acting county police commander of Embu at the time made an appalling statement, urging Embu residents to stop provoking the police and warning that soldiers would be sent to restore order if the riots did not stop. the protests finally ended on Saturday, 7th August 2021, after the Deputy Inspector General of Police at the time, Edward Mbugua, assured the public that the officers responsible for the brothers' deaths would be arrested and prosecuted. He also visited Kianjokoma and the brothers' home and issued a directive to transfer Manyata Police Station OCPD Emily Ngaroya and her deputy OCS Abdullahi Yaya to the Eastern Regional Police Headquarters with immediate effect. Additionally, he supported the opening of a new police station on Monday, 30th August 2021, the Kianjokoma Police Station, with the hopes of rebuilding the relationship between the police and the residents of Kianjokoma. In spite of the police's efforts to clean house, an autopsy to determine the cause of death of the two brothers, Ben and Emmanuel, would reveal the brutal manner in which they died at the hands of the police. The autopsy, which was conducted on Friday, 6th August 2021 at the Embu Level 5 Hospital mortuary, revealed that the brothers died from injuries inflicted by a blunt object. Ben had severe head injuries from a hard object, bruises on his face, a broken leg, and broken ribs, likely from being stomped on. For Emmanuel, he had severe head injuries from a blunt object that had cracked his skull open. These injuries, according to the pathologists and family lawyers, were inconsistent with the police's account that the brothers had jumped from a moving police car. So what happened to Ben and Emmanuel? There are two narratives of what happened to them, one from the police and another from their parents and eyewitnesses. We'll share both accounts with you and let you decide which version is plausible. According to the police officer's account of events, shared by the Embu North OCPD at the time, Emily Ngaroya, 6 officers from Manyata Police Station were involved in the operation. Corporal Benson Buthia, who was in charge, Corporal Consolata Kariuki, and police constables Martin Wanyama, Lilian Cherono, Nicholas Sang, and James Mwaniki. In Kianjokoma, the officers allegedly arrested 4 people, including Ben and Emmanuel, and loaded them into the back of a police Land Cruiser. At the time, there were already 6 other detainees in the vehicle. This means that there were 10 detainees in the back of the police car. Constables Cherono, Wanyama, and Sang then sat at the back of the car with the 10 detainees. Meanwhile, Corporal Mbuvi and Constables Njiru and Mwaniki were in the front, with Mwaniki driving. At the back of the car, the police claim one of the detainees overheard Ben and Emmanuel plotting to escape. The 2 brothers then opened the canvas covering the back of the police Land Cruiser and jumped out while the car was moving through a steep area on the way to Mbuvori, where the officers were headed to pick up a suspect. Upon reaching Mbuvori, the officers were allegedly still not aware that Ben and Emmanuel had escaped, and the officers picked up the additional suspect, placed him in the back of the vehicle, and drove to Manyata Police Station. It was when they got to Manyata Police Station that they claimed to have discovered the 2 brothers were missing. This happened when Corporal Benson Buthia was escorting the detainees out of the Land Cruiser, and he noticed they were 9 and not 11. When he asked the remaining detainees where Ben and Emmanuel were, he claims they informed him that they had jumped. The police officers then returned to the location where Ben and Emmanuel had jumped at, and this is where they found the 2 young men dead. Here's a statement by the OCPD. Have a listen and we'll discuss further.
Kuna watu 6, kopro wawili na askari 4 ambao walikuwa wameenda operation wakati wa Kianjokoma. Na katika street moja wakapata vijana wamekusanyika, na it was already past hours. Na wakati ule hawa vijana waliona askari wakija, wakatoroka. Waliweza kuarrest vijana 2. Na already kulikuwa na 2 tena gari. So pale Kianjokoma waliweza kushika watu 4, na 4 pia wengine walikuwa wameshikwa Kiriari, na 2 pia walikuwa wameshikwa Mushagori. Kwa hivyo in total walikuwa na watu 10. Kuna moja walikuwa wanaenda kuchukua pande ya Buvori kuwa ameassault mtu. So katika ile hali wakielekea Buvori kutoka Kiriari, kuna kamteremko kako hapo, na that's where hao vijana wawili, kulingana na vile tulikuja kuelezewa baadaye na mmoja ya maabusu, ya kwamba walikuwa wanaongea polepole, na katika ile hali wakaweza kufungua hema. Walikuwa upande wa mwisho kabisa, waliweza kufungua hema na wakaweza kuruka gari ikitembea. Na kama tunavyojua kwamba gari ikitembea katika mwendo, hakika ukianguka either uumie ama upoteze maisha. Hivyo ndivyo tulikuja kujua baadaye kwamba vijana waliweza kuruka, na wakati ule mabusu wote waliweza kufikishwa kwa sababu haikujulikana, na yule kijana ambaye aliweza kusikia wakinongozeana bila watatoroka hakusema. After kufika hapa, ndio koplo mwenye alikuwa na hiyo group alihesabu mabusu, na katika ile hali kuhesabu mabusu akaona kuna less ya wawili, na wakauliza wenzao wako wapi kwa sababu mlikuwa 11. Akasema hapana, kuna vijana walikuwa wananongozeana bila watatoroka. Akauliza mbona hukusema na gari ingesimama? Hapana, sababu ni mwenzetu, mimi nilikuwa nafikiria wanajisaidia. So hapo ndio waliweza kurudi nyuma ili waangalie maybe kama katika ile hali ya kuanguka kama waliumia waweze kuwachukua wapeleka hospitali, lakini bahati mbaya wakawapata kama wamepoteza maisha. Hivyo ndivyo ilikuwa. Kitu kama hicho kikitendeka, sudden death, huwa tunachukua statement kama ni hao witness maabusu ambaye tumerecord statement zao zote, na inquiry file inafunguliwa. Ikifunguliwa inapelekwa mbele ionekane kama kulikuwa na either negligence ya mtu. So tayari tumefungua inquiry na uchunguzi unaendelea.
Now, let's examine this statement critically. One thing is certain. The back of a Kenya police Land Cruiser is not the size of a football stadium. It's a relatively small space. So how could Ben and Emmanuel manage to escape without 3 police officers noticing? Additionally, how is it that only one detainee allegedly witnessed the escape? How come the other 8 detainees did not see Ben and Emmanuel jump out of the moving car? And even if Ben and Emmanuel had jumped from the moving vehicle, the impact of their bodies hitting the tarmac would have caught the attention of the officers inside the vehicle. Another thing missing from the statement is a timeline of events. We question this omission because we know Ben and Emmanuel were arrested a few minutes past 10 p.m. and their bodies were taken to the mortuary at 4 a.m. That's almost 6 hours. How come in the police officer's statement, there was no mention of a timeline breaking down the time the police drove from Kianjokoma Market to Buvori, then to Manyata Police Station, then to Buvori again, where the police claimed to have found Ben and Emmanuel deceased? The police narrative that Ben and Emmanuel jumped out of a moving police car was vehemently refuted by their parents and multiple eyewitnesses, including their close friend Bugendi, who saw the officers place both brothers in the front seat of the police car. Furthermore, according to witnesses who spoke to John, the brother's father, when the police arrived at Manyata Police Station, they parked the car, allowed the detainees in the back to exit, and booked them into custody. However, Ben and Emmanuel remained in the car. A few minutes later, the police allegedly drove away with Ben and Emmanuel. Based on the information John gathered from various eyewitnesses about what happened afterward, which he later shared with journalist John Alan Namu, the police car stopped around 2 a.m. at a location yet to be named between Manyata Police Station and Buvori. A witness allegedly reported hearing many loud banging noises from the police car. Given that a pool of blood and clumps of Ben's blonde dyed hair were found at the scene, and Ben's head was severely deformed, John is convinced that the police may have used the car door to take Ben's life. After finishing off the two brothers, the police allegedly drove to a river near Mbuvori with the bodies. Fortunately, according to John, Ben and Emmanuel's father, a group of footballers returning from Narok, their car broke down nearby and they are alleged to have seen the officers with two deceased bodies. John believes the police were attempting to dump his son's bodies in the river before being interrupted by the footballers. Benson, Njiru, Ndwiga and Emmanuel Mutura Ndwiga were laid to rest at their family home in an emotional send-off on Friday 13th August 2021. The brothers, who were inseparable in life, were also buried together in the same grave. During the burial ceremony, their family, schoolmates, and local leaders called for justice, demanding for those responsible for their deaths be held accountable. Tragedy sadly struck the Ndwiga family once again, just a week later, when their 94-year-old grandmother, Gladys Embu, succumbed to grief. Gladys had been so devastated by the loss of her grandsons, whom she was very close to, that she stopped speaking after learning of their deaths. On Friday, 13th August 2021, the day Ben and Emmanuel were buried, their grandmother fell sick and was rushed to Runyenje's hospital, where she passed away a week later. She was laid to rest on Wednesday, 25th August 2021, at her home also in Kianjokoma, Embu County. On Monday, 16th August 2021, 3 days after Ben and Emmanuel were buried, 6 police officers, that is Corporal Benson Puthia, Corporal Consolata Kariuki, and Police Constables Martin Wanyama, Lilian Cherono, Nicholas Sang, and James Waniki were arrested for their suspected involvement in the deaths of Benson and Emmanuel. They were arraigned at the Milimani Law Courts the following day, Tuesday, 17th August 2021. The police officers stuck with their story that the two brothers had jumped out of a moving police car. In a surprising turn of events, on Thursday, 26th August 2021, the 6 officers, through their lawyers, petitioned the court to block the Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, from charging them with murder. Instead, they requested for an inquest into the brothers' deaths. In their petition, they also sued the DPP, the Inspector General of Police, and the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA. What was even more gut-wrenching and showed a complete lack of empathy for the two brothers' family was their request for Ben and Emmanuel to be exhumed for a second autopsy. For this autopsy, they demanded to be represented by a lawyer and their own pathologist, claiming they had not been present during the first autopsy and that the cause of death, blunt force trauma, could have resulted from the brothers jumping from the moving police car. IPOA and the DPP strongly opposed this request. While these petitions were still pending, the 6 officers pleaded not guilty on 31st August 2021. Fortunately, on 2nd September 2021, the court rejected their request to exhume the bodies of Benson and Emmanuel. The court also declined their request for the court to direct the DPP to drop the murder charges against them and instead pursue an inquest into the deaths of Ben and Emmanuel. On Thursday, 4th November 2021, after spending 3 months in remand, the 6 officers were released on a 3 million Kenyan shillings bond. In the bond ruling, the late Justice Daniel Ogembo ordered that the 6 police officers were not to visit Kianjokoma without the court's permission to prevent witness interference. As 2022 began, court hearings commenced, with several witnesses taking the stand, including Catherine and John Ndwiga, John Mugendi, and the 2 brothers' uncle Felix Njagi. A particularly striking revelation came from their uncle's testimony. Njagi recounted that while at Manyata police station, overwhelmed by grief, he sat in his car. Allegedly, Police Constable Mwaniki, the officer who had been driving the police car involved in the incident, casually approached him for a conversation. Shockingly, Mwaniki allegedly told him that the 2 brothers' family would be compensated through the police car's insurance. This deeply hurt Njagi, as no amount of money could bring back his nephews. Reading between the lines, it could be that Police Constable Moniki was trying to incentivize the two brothers' family with money to not pursue any legal action. Sadly, after these crucial testimonies, the case stalled. When the trial judge, the late Justice Daniel Ogembo, was transferred, this was in 2022. The case was set to resume in late 2024, with a mention date scheduled for September of that year. It was then pushed to 4th December 2024 and later to 23rd January 2025. As the case resumes in 2025, we can only hope that justice will finally be served. We'll also be sure to keep you updated of any new developments in the case. We extend our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of Benson Njiru Ndwiga and Emmanuel Mutura Ndwiga. May their souls continue to rest in eternal peace. Thank you for joining us today. If you appreciated this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to be notified when the next video is up. Until then, please take care, stay safe, and always trust your gut.